Welcome to News 9 Plus special coverage from Raisina Dialogues 2023. We have got today with us Reinhard Bütikofer, Member of Parliament from EU. Thank you, sir, for joining us today. My first question to you is after an year of this Russia-Ukraine war that's been happening, have we reached a point of stalemate, or is it going to be a decisive move one way or the other right now?
Over the last couple of months, the war has developed into a war of attrition with little movement of the lines of interaction. I would hope that with additional support from European partners and also the United States, that during this spring, Ukraine can continue with the successes which they have had in the latter part of last year to liberate parts of the occupied country from the Russian invaders. So I think there's a good chance of having movement, and I believe this would at the same time constitute the necessary precondition for getting close to peace, or at least negotiations, because as long as the Russian aggressor believes that they can achieve some of their goals, they will not negotiate. President Putin has said that very clearly.
So there is a lot of requirement of arms and ammunition, as you mentioned earlier, about from Ukraine. So is NATO really going to put on boots on the ground, because will it reach that escalation point?
No. And nobody's ever speculated about it, with the exception of the Russians, who pretend they're at war with NATO, but we're not at war with them. We're not a warring party. None of the NATO member states is. And we have the clear intention, and that has been expressed by our own Chancellor, by President Macron of France, and by President Biden. NATO will not be at war with Russia.
So President Zelenskyy recently said that, the situation might come where NATO has to put in extra effort. So is there a...
No, sorry, I would like to correct that.
Okay.
President Zelenskyy has not asked for NATO troops on Ukraine.
No, I'm not talking about troops. I'm saying that he said that we need arms and ammunition, because otherwise there will be eventually Baltic states will be invaded by Russia, and this will lead to NATO getting involved directly.
Well, there's a point to that argument, because President Putin, before he ordered the invasion, made clear public statements where he demanded that Russia should be given a say over the construction of the European security architecture. And he challenged the sovereignty not only of Ukraine, he also challenged the sovereignty of the Baltic countries several times. So indeed, I believe convincing Putin and the Kremlin through a very successful defense of Ukrainian sovereignty and territorial integrity, that military adventurism is not a way forward, could help stabilize all of Europe.
Ukraine's industry has been decimated like anything. So do you think that, considering the fact that Russia itself now says that we have the territory that we wanted, okay, so they are not going to budge from their places, how does Ukraine go about further from this point on now?
Well, look, I'm not privy to the internal deliberations of the Ukrainian leadership. I can only report what you would also be able to read in the media. The political answer, I think, is that this war of aggression that runs counter to everything that the United Nations Charter stands for has to end with a Ukrainian victory. And Ukrainian victory can be more or less complete, but at least the political goal should be supported by everybody who believes in the principles of national sovereignty and territorial integrity of each country, that Russia would end with being defeated.
So there's a clear global polarization across EU, G7 one side, Russia one side, and of course there are many countries who are on a neutral front like India and China. So how does the world go about, because economy is tied up every places, it's a small world in that sense. So how does these differences come across and how this can be resolved in near future? Because that's very important.
Well, I'm afraid I have to contradict your description of the international arena, because it's not just Europe and G7 and NATO on the side of Ukraine. It's 141 countries in the United Nations General Assembly. 141 countries have voted twice, last year and this year, against Russia and asked Russia to leave Ukraine. So that's a vast majority of the international community. There are, of course, countries that have not taken that kind of position, India being one of them, China another. Still, I would not lump all those countries together. I would clearly differentiate between the position of India and the position of China. China is not neutral in that conflict. China is in bed with Russia. China spreads Russian lies every night on TV to their own domestic audience, and every Chinese diplomatic representation spreads the Russian lies, in particular in countries along the global south. So China is pretending to be neutral, but is not. China, unfortunately, the Chinese leadership, thinks they benefit from this war because the war distracts the United States from the Indo-Pacific. It might weaken Europe. It might make Russia more dependent on China. All benefits to a power with hegemonic ambitions. So I think you should not put India in the same box.
Okay, so since you're talking about China, is this the Ukraine template that is working for Russia? Is this China looking something like that vis-a-vis Taiwan?
Well, a lot of people have been asking that question. And the first part of my answer would be, look, if we had reacted with more consequence when Russia attacked Georgia in 2008, if we had reacted more forcefully when Russia attacked Ukraine first in 2014, taking Crimea and parts of the Donbass, maybe we could have avoided the war. But Russia believed that they could pursue their aggressive revisionist agenda without meeting too much pushback from Europe and the United States. That was their miscalculation. Now, I think we should learn a lesson from that and apply it to the Chinese case, saying we don't want China to engage in a strategy of military adventurism. We want stability in the Taiwan Strait. We don't want unilateral change, and particularly not by force in the Taiwan Strait. So we should, on one hand, reassure China that we're not supporting Taiwan independence. On the other hand, deter China from going to war. And I believe in the phrase that Kevin Rudd, the former Australian Prime Minister, used as a title for his recent book, The Avoidable War. This war over Taiwan could be avoidable if we apply the right policies.
So yesterday, the Russian foreign minister was almost parroting China's line, where it says the groups like Quad or the Asia Pacific, wherever the groups, the security groups are, they are being formed to, take on a certain country or something. So is there a meeting of 2 points by Russia and China in that sense?
I'm afraid you're right. there is a coalition between the authoritarian Russian leadership and the totalitarian Chinese leadership. They have called it publicly a no-limits friendship, and they have clearly signaled to the world that they pursue the revisionist plan of restructuring international relations under the dominance of an authoritarian camp led by China, effectively. That would do away with multilateralism, that would undercut the United Nations Charter, that would question the national sovereignty of so many countries around the globe, in particular, of course, their immediate neighbors. And India has seen the example of what China is going to do, has been doing over recent years, not respecting their neighbors' sovereignty. So I think we all should be aware of the risk. This is not just about Europe. This is about the principles of international relations. Either everybody has agency and a say, or the global relations are shaped like hub and spokes, where the authoritarian powers are the hubs.
So how do you see India providing a leadership role, playing a leadership role in addressing these kind of global issues?
Well, I believe that one dimension in which our position has been, and when I say our, I mean the Europeans, and in particular the Germans' position, has been weakened through policy mistakes that we have committed, is in the relationship with countries from the global south. Give you an example, the Pacific Island states. Germany has not had a single ambassador residing in any of the 10 nations. We're now trying to make up for that. But this reluctance to take issues seriously around the globe and to understand that we should be involved with solving problems and partnering, this is something where we have made mistakes, a lot of mistakes. India, however, claims that it can build a bridge between the global north and countries of the global south. In that regard, I think India could use the credibility that it has to further a perspective that is not just dominated by anti-Chinese or anti-Russian policy making, but by a vision of shared future for mankind, better life for everybody.
Last question for you. This year's Raisina Dialogues theme is a lighthouse in the tempest. So how do you see this platform providing global countries to address the uncertainties facing currently?
Well, I think nobody can say about themselves, we are a lighthouse. That's something that others have to be saying about you before it's an accepted reality. But I would echo what the Italian Prime Minister, a European leader with whom I'm very much at odds on most policies, has said in her inaugural speech to start the conference. Every country can be a lighthouse. And I think trying to be lighthouses as best we can should be our joint endeavors.
Thank you, sir, for speaking to News 9 Plus. So it's a pleasure.